around 220 South African children die from burns because someone wasn't watching. At what point do you decide to get involved?
Accidental injury is responsible for the majority of deaths of innocent children that occur annually throughout the world. As parents, we need to keep our children safe from harm. Their safety is just as crucial as their health and well-being. So today we're discussing child safety. We'll learn about common causes of accidental injuries in a home environment, simple steps you can take to prevent these, and how to handle some emergencies involving children. I'm Dr. Solomon Daou, and this is Health Talk. Before our main topic, though, let's have a look at current health stories making headlines.
Bring a child into the world, you need to protect them. There is no greater tragedy, no greater injustice than the untimely death of a child. Children end up in hospital due to trauma for accidents that can be prevented. Every year, 6,500 children die in South Africa as a result of untimely injuries. Children are curious by nature. They will explore and plunder at any given opportunity. Fire is one of the most hazardous killers in the home. Ingestion of medication, cleaning products, cosmetics, and other toxic products can be life-threatening for children.
Spit it out! Spit it out! Spit it out! He's taking some sleeping pills.
What is worse is that most, if not all, of these accidents are preventable. Making your home a safer place is crucial, as it can help reduce the risk of injuries. Electrical shocks can cause death. Block all exposed electrical points to avoid your child from electrocution. Knowing that the loss of your child could have been prevented is a burden that no parent or guardian should have to carry.
So a home is meant to be a special place where children feel safe and secure. Sadly, many children get injured in and around their homes, and a lot die from these preventable injuries. It is therefore very important that we protect our children by providing a safe home environment. Now, to further talk about this, let's welcome from our Cape Town studio Professor Sebastian van As, who's a trauma surgeon and head of the trauma unit at the Red Cross Children's Hospital in Cape Town. Professor van As, welcome to Health Talk.
Good morning, Cello.
Right, we've seen examples of some of these accidents that can occur in a home environment. But perhaps just broadly, what are the commonest sort of accidents and injuries that involve children in a home environment, especially?
Thank you very much, Cello, for inviting us on the show. Trauma, accidents and injuries, it's actually one of the most common diseases for children. People are not aware of it, but if you look at children between the age of 1 and 18 years old, the most common cause is accidents and injuries for children to become disabled, to come to hospital or to die. So trauma globally is a massive problem, and close to 1 million children die each year in the whole world. In South Africa, the number is, as you mentioned, about 6,500 children under the age of 15 die as a result of trauma. Okay, so in this group of motor vehicle crashes, there are two main categories.
Right.
The biggest one is children walking as pedestrians and being hit by a car.
Right.
That's about 70 to 80%. And the second biggest group is children in the car, child passengers. That's 20 to 30%. Right. So motor vehicle traffic-related crashes is the biggest cause of children to die. The second most common cause is drowning, and the third one is burns.
All right. Let's come back to the home environment now and talk about perhaps, if we go according to these categories that you outlined just now, some of the physical injuries that, children sustain from time to time. Can you perhaps just take us through some of the common ones and some of the common reasons why they happen?
Yes. To make it easy, I would divide for children under the age of 6 and children from the age of 6 onwards.
Right.
Now, children under the age of 6 are very vulnerable for injuries because they are neurodevelopmentally immature. With other words, children under the age of 6, they cannot assess the dangers in their environment by themselves. So they really depend completely on caretakers, on all elder people to make sure the environment is safe. And we see that the majority of children under the age of 6, they get injured in and around the house. So there's a lot what parents and caretakers can do to make sure that these injuries won't occur.
Yeah.
From the age of 6, children are going to school, and then traffic becomes a very important issue.
Right.
So the transport to and from school. But under the age of 6, to go there, the most risky things are drowning and burns.
But now, just coming back, I mean, obviously children are vulnerable, and parents play a major role in obviously protecting them. But if we just look at some of the risk factors and causes for these so-called physical injuries, let's just say, we can't blame children, all right? Now, very often, is it a question of children being neglected or lack of supervision? Your comment around that?
Yeah, that's a difficult question, Cello, because we definitely do not want to put the blame at parents and caretakers. But we must also look at the demographics.
Yeah.
Our child injuries are much higher than in countries in Europe, but we must take a number of factors into consideration.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at the areas where our children come from, many of them are informal settlements,
right,
or poor areas.
Yeah.
Now, we all know that, for instance, in the townships, there's a lot of children. Of course, if there are small children at home and they come from school or crash,
yeah,
there is no one to look after them.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I think that complicates the problem.
All right, we've got about just under a minute left. Now, in terms of practical advice you can give to parents in terms of making the home environment safe, What's your advice? What can they do inside the house and outside the house?
The most important things, Cello, is that people are unaware of the dangers. People are not aware that trauma is a big disease and kills a lot of children. People are very caring when it comes to vaccinations. They go to the clinic and they have their kids vaccinated. But they don't realize that the majority of children die from accidents and injuries. Now, one very good tip, which was designed by one of our social workers, for if you've got children in the home under the age of 6, to go on your knees and on your elbows, crawl through your house, see whatever is in the reach of a child, and whatever it is, if there's electric cables, if there is hot water, if there is sharp instruments like scissors, or if there is a tablecloth on which the child can pull, all these things should be made safe. So that is a very practical way.
Okay.
So just put yourself down to the level of the child and see what the child can reach. And of course, what you can reach in that position, then children can reach it, and you can prevent a lot of trouble by doing that.
All right, very valuable advice indeed, Professor Van As. There we're going to have to leave it. Thank you so much for your contribution, and we wish you well. All right, coming up after the break, simple first aid tips to deal with home emergencies involving children.
Every year, around 220 South African children die
Okay, I'm just pressing on it.
because someone wasn't watching. At what point do you decide to get involved?
Okay, whereas we may be vigilant in our homes, accidents do often occur. So what do you do when faced with an emergency such as, say, your child falling off a swing comes running to you and shows you a deep bleeding wound? To help us with this and other questions, we welcome into our studio Professor Ashraf Kuvadia, who is the head of pediatrics at Rahima Musa Mother and Child Hospital in Johannesburg. And we also have Nicole de Montiel, who is an advanced life support and paramedic and a training officer from ER24. Nicole, welcome to Health Talk.
Thank you.
All right, let's just, in this segment, I mean, we had in the previous one where we're talking about all sorts of, accidents that can happen in a home situation. I'd like us to just be a bit more practical in this session and just go through some of the tips that people sitting at home can do when faced with an emergency. Let's start with choking, because I see you have a baby doll in front of you.
I do.
Okay. I mean, this is something common. Perhaps you want to comment about choking first, Prof. Kuvadia?
Well, I can say choking is probably one of the commonest ways that children, particularly young children, toddlers, suffer from very sort of emergent or acute respiratory problems. If a child comes in who's otherwise well in a hospital or a clinic and is suddenly in trouble with breathing, the first thing one thinks about is whether the child swallowed something and inhaled something, and it's very common. Children pick things up, put them in their mouths, and very rapidly. And it doesn't have to be very big. In fact, often very small little items that can cause major problems.
So what effect does it have? I mean, if let's say, the child doesn't get help, what actually will happen?
Well, the most dire consequence is that they may die from lack of oxygen going into their lungs and their brains, and in a matter of a few minutes.
Okay.
I mean,
so it is quite an emergency.
It's an emergency.
All right. Nicole, then here's the situation. We're busy. We just had dinner. Children are playing around, and suddenly you realize that a child is choking. What do you do?
So obviously the very first thing is to assess the child and determine if they're awake or unconscious. Typically, little ones like this are crawling around. Their eyes are very good at spotting those funny buttons and little sweeties and funny things on the floor. If the child's still relatively alert, typically parents instinctively panic. So one of the first things you need to do is obviously support their little heads because their necks aren't that strong. Get them head down because you're trying to use gravity as your best friend. Between the backs, the shoulder blades, really, all you got to do is just 5 good back slaps should get it out.
How hard should you hit?
Firm. You're actually trying to stimulate a bit of a cough. And force, because we've all got a little bit of air always left in our lungs. So you're trying to use that little bit of air to create a sort of force of air to expel the object out. And then just turn the little one over, and if you can spot it in the mouth, pull it out. If you can't spot it in the mouth, don't go digging. Okay. And then,
So do you start by looking at the mouth to see if
if
there's
you
something?
can see it, yes, get it out.
Okay.
Often, if it's still in the mouth and you turn them over, it'll fall out automatically.
Right, okay.
But if it doesn't come out with the back slaps, you can flip them over, find the little nipples, and on their breastbone, you just use 2 fingers and you push quite hard. They don't break, I promise. They're quite supple.
Yeah.
5 pushes.
Yeah.
And if you can hear a little bit of air coming out, that means that they can get air in.
Okay.
And what you're trying to do is just create a gap for them to get air. While you're doing this, get someone else to call for an emergency support service of some sort, an ambulance. 112 off your cell phone will get you through to the 112 emergency centres,
Right.
and they will ask you what province and what town you're in,
Yeah.
and they will patch you through to the local emergency services,
Yeah.
and then they can assist you and send a response team out to give you assistance.
All right. Does it matter whether or not the child is conscious or unconscious?
You know, at this point in time, typically they're conscious. If they're unconscious, we default to CPR. But the point is if you can't get air in, all you're doing is chest compressions. You're trying to get that object to come out enough
Right.
to be able to get some air in.
Okay.
And you don't have a lot of time, but you buy time by doing compressions and CPR.
Okay. I see. I mean, this is for a small baby. What about a youngish child, 8, 10 years old?
Okay.
Yeah.
You can do, we've all heard of the Heimlich maneuver. We've seen it on videos, we've seen it in
On television, I
movies,
mean,
all
that's
over
it.
the place, yes. So really what you do is, remember as an adult, we're a lot stronger than these little guys are.
Yeah.
One fist, find their belly button,
Yeah.
find the bottom of their breastbone,
Yeah.
and in the gap,
Yeah.
just use one fist, okay?
Yeah.
You're trying to, and you push in and up, and you're trying to tickle the diaphragm
Yeah.
to stimulate a cough.
But where are you standing now in relation to the
You are
child?
behind the child. So,
Right.
Prof, do you mind standing up? I need to use him as a demo model.
All right, sure.
So basically, assuming Prof's a very big child,
Yeah.
you find his belly button, you find the bottom of his breastbone, you come in behind,
Right.
and then you just use your hand to support, and you push in and up at the same time.
Right.
But quite a powerful thrust.
Okay.
It's important that that thrust is powerful.
And
'cause
just once, eh?
once, twice, up to 5 times.
Right.
Hopefully, you get it out within the first or second one.
Yeah.
I know from a mother with a child that choked, my paramedic instincts out the window. First thing I did was slap her between the shoulder blades. So that can also work.
Yeah, yeah. All right.
Just to add on that, it's a very instinctive response for someone to slap a person who's, someone who's choking,
Yeah.
hoping that you would get the object out. But in fact, you often do more harm by doing that. Because
okay.
when you slap them on their back, what happens is the chest goes forward, head goes back, and the object then tends to go lower down.
Yeah.
So that should be discouraged. I just wanted to add that, either the chest compressions or the back slaps or the Heimlich maneuver,
Yeah.
what you're actually trying to achieve is an artificial cough.
Cough, yes.
Right?
To get them to
If
cough it out. Yeah.
the individual is coughing,
Yeah.
if you can hear them coughing, they're going to do a much better job than your artificial cough. So allow them to cough and support them.
All right.
You do these maneuvers in a situation where they're absolutely now not doing anything. They're silent, they can't achieve a cough. Then you're then creating this artificial cough by this quick pressure that you're delivering to the chest by pressing on either the chest or the abdomen to get them to expel the object.
Okay. All right. Let's move away from choking. I think we've covered enough on that. Children tend to ingest a whole lot of stuff that we keep, either intentionally or unintentionally, in places where they can reach. For instance, some of the biggest mistakes, we do is to put some of these things in cool drink bottles.
Correct.
And the children grab these and drink.
Correct.
What then should people do when they discover that the children have ingested a few chemicals? We can talk, let's say, paraffin or bleach or whatever. What should they do?
All right, and as you clearly stated, that paraffin is one of the commonest actually ingested substances because it's often put into a cold drink bottle and left probably in a cupboard and in reach, very accessible.
Yeah.
What one has to do, first of all, not panic. Okay, it's not going to immediately cause harm or injury. Reflect, almost as a reflex, children will tend to vomit a lot of the stuff, and they generally won't take in large volumes.
Yeah.
Okay, you often find parents trying to give them things to cause vomiting.
Right.
Sometimes they give them milk to cause vomiting.
Yeah.
We tend to discourage them to try and cause them to vomit because vomiting might result in other complications. They
Right.
might actually, inhale some of the material that you're trying to not have spread anyway. So we try and discourage vomiting.
Yeah.
It's important that the parents then try to get that child to a clinic as soon as possible with the agent that they may have taken, so that they can evaluate the child to see whether what has the child ingested. Each of these substances have different longer-term complications. For the most part, most of them are very short-term and don't require any, just observation.
Okay.
But some of them might.
So at home, don't induce vomiting?
No.
Do you give milk?
I would say no. Don't, because milk would tend to cause them to vomit.
Right.
So don't give any milk.
So don't give anything. The best thing is just take whatever it is that the child you think has ingested, get them to the nearest hospital as soon as possible.
Yeah, it clearly it depends on also the volume that they've taken.
Right.
Sometimes it may have just been a few drops, and so that doesn't really warrant that sort of emergency. But we're talking about a child who's actually ingested something. You're concerned. You're not sure what amount they've taken.
Yeah.
And even paraffin might seem harmless in a way, but in a few hours it could cause respiratory complications in the child.
All right. Nicole, children play around. They often get injured. They fall and they break their bones. They, get themselves cut. They come with open bleeding wounds. How do we deal with open bleeding wounds in children?
Once again, first most important point, don't panic. Because if you start panicking, the child starts panicking, and their hearts beat faster, and obviously then the wound bleeds more.
Yeah.
So one of the most important things is, as far as possible, keep the child calm. Wherever the wound is, if you can elevate it above the level of the heart, that's first prize. So arms, legs, lie them down.
You're going to have to explain that. Elevate above the level of the heart. Yeah.
So
Right.
I have cut my arm. I'm one of those children, I'm running around, I stick my arm through a glass window.
Yeah.
Happens often, more often actually than I think we know.
Yeah.
The heart sits sort of in the middle of the chest.
Right.
So get it above the level of the heart, because that way the body has to work a little bit harder and it slows down the bleeding fractionally.
Right.
Ideally, if you can see that if there's any glass or objects left in it, leave it. Don't pull them out. And get a clean towel. If you have bandages or gauze or something along those lines, try and apply direct pressure onto the wound. And once you've got direct pressure on, then you can then either move the child to a vehicle and take them to hospital if you have your own vehicle, or call for emergency assistance.
So nothing
to an
like
ambulance.
take the hose pipe and clean that.
Negative Ghost Rider, that is a bad idea. It's nice to be able to clean the wound, but first you've got to stop the bleeding.
Right.
Then and only then can you reassess it. But if it's that big that you actually have to apply pressure, you probably need experts to look at it.
Let's talk a little bit about applying pressure now. Where exactly do you apply the pressure?
Directly on the wound. If there's glass or something stuck on it, you need to apply around the glass, because you don't want to push the glass further into the wound. Or a stick or a broken bone that's sticking out, you don't want to push on top of that either. So around the wound if there's objects in it, but if the wound is clear of foreign objects, directly on the wound, put direct pressure, and if the blood starts coming through, don't get excited, just get another towel or bandage and apply more pressure. You've just got to keep pressure on the whole time.
Whilst making your way to hospital.
Whilst making your way to hospital, or if you are an adult alone with a child, you obviously aren't going to be able to drive to hospital, so call for assistance, yell for a neighbour. If you can, one finger dial for help through 112 on your cell phone. The nice thing about 112 is you don't even have to have a SIM card in the phone. You can still call for help.
Prof, people read the internet, consult Dr. Google, and watch television and what have you. They learn about this concept called a tourniquet. And they grab stuff, they want to tie things around to, reduce the bleeding or stop the bleeding. Your comment on that?
So I would go along with what Nicole just said. You try and apply pressure directly to where the bleeding is coming from. Right? Because applying a tourniquet higher up, which is where people probably would try and reduce blood there, will probably do more damage than good. I mean, the intention is to try and decrease bleeding, we understand that, but what they might do is actually compromise flow to the entire limb, and that's not what you want. In a setting where already, someone's lost blood, they may be going into shock, possibly. So you want to try and minimize the decreased blood flow to the limb as much as possible. Right. So you try and just stop where the bleeding is. Try and reduce it just above where it is or where the bleeding might be gushing from. Apply pressure directly there.
All right. Some people get scared, I mean, when they see arterial bleeding, you know, where blood is squirting out like that. Practically, what should they do?
Direct pressure.
Direct pressure?
Direct pressure,
Doesn't matter
no
whether
difference.
it's seeping or squirting out.
It makes absolutely no difference.
Right.
Direct pressure is going to stop the bleeding, because what you're trying to do is minimize the space the blood's coming out from, where the damage is, and hopefully the body's own natural clotting mechanisms will kick into gear and will start creating a clot, and it will stop its bleeding by itself. But you just need to give it a chance to work.
Okay.
So look,
Let's talk.
I just want to add on this direct pressure aspect and the bleeding aspect. We must encourage parents to keep a pair of gloves at home.
Right.
And you know, because it may be anyone who has to do this, not just a parent. And
Sure.
you know, infection control is very important as well. And it's not very expensive to keep these gloves.
Right.
And you know, just your 2 fingers within a glove, even if you don't have a towel, you don't even have a bandage around, even your 2 fingers will make a difference. Putting it directly with a glove and it's very easy to compress an artery and stop it bleeding. If you with your 2 fingers.
All right. Let's talk about fractures now. Say somebody looks like, you know, a child has broken a bone anywhere in the body. What should parents do in dealing with this sort of thing?
Start once again, don't panic, it's okay. For the most part, believe it or not, kids are actually quite robust. And when there's a broken arm or a broken collarbone, they tend to self-splint. So they tend to guard the problem. If it's a leg, they tend to guard the problem. They won't let you go near it too much. If you can't move the child, or if the child's not ambulatory, so they can't move themselves, you know, broken arm, they'll protect it themselves, that's fine. Take them to the hospital, let them be checked out. A broken leg, I would recommend get the professionals in. That's what the ambulance services are there for. Whether you call a private service to assist you or the government services to assist you, the guys are trained. They know what to do, and they will be able to move the child comfortably without doing any further harm or damage.
All right, great stuff. So whatever it is, just leave the child there, call an ambulance to come and sort it out. Okay, let's talk a little bit about bends. I mean, it's quite a common problem. I suppose maybe not this time of the year, but you know, during winter time and so on. Children get bent by all sorts of stuff, be it boiling water or you know, all sorts of other stuff. Sure. How should parents deal with bends?
Don't panic.
All right. In all situations, in an emergency, just don't panic. Eh?
Don't panic.
All right.
I mean, even if the child is alight, you don't panic. So even if in the worst case scenario the child has caught fire and there's a flame around the child, the best way to actually stop that flame, we talk about drop and roll. Now, you know, an adult, you can tell an adult to do that. Cover the child immediately with a blanket.
Okay, so the child comes running to you and he's got flames all over around. You just don't panic.
Don't panic.
Right.
That's not the typical situation. Okay, so the typical situation for most kids who get burnt is through hot liquids. Okay. That's the most common. You know, they've pulled on a cord. There's a kettle of hot water. There's a cup of tea even, and they've burnt themselves. It's usually a liquid burn rather than through flames, direct flames.
Now the good old ladies will say, okay, get some toothpaste and apply onto the wound, or get some sunlight or something black polish to apply onto the wound. Your comment?
We totally discourage anything. In fact, the first thing you ought to do when someone has just had, a child has had heat injury, is to cool that area down as quickly as possible. And the best means of cooling that down is to just have that part of the body under just ordinary running tap water. Not cold water necessarily from the fridge. You don't want to do that. Just go under the ordinary tap water and let it run for a few minutes. So you immediately cooling the cells that have now received this heat injury. Leave it there for a number of minutes, maybe even 5 minutes, to let that area cool. Once that area is cooled, you're not going to put any of these substances, none of these substances. I don't want to mention because people will remember what I said. None of these substances. You cool it. If there's a first aid kit in the home, which we strongly encourage every family to keep, they're not terribly expensive, you might cover it with a light dressing. There may be a sort of a burn kind of dressing.
If there isn't, should they cover these wounds?
Generally not. Generally, rather keep them open. You can take the child, even in that state, to the hospital in that state. Because you know, when you start covering it, you tend to start, you may be peeling off skin, you may be increasing the risk of infection. So you don't want to get secondary injury to that area.
Yeah, okay. It looks like there's quite a lot of stuff that we should be talking about, but unfortunately we don't have all the time. All right, coming up after the break is water safety and dealing with drowning. Stay with us.
Every year, on average, over 320 South African children die by drowning. At what point do you decide to get involved?
Children like playing in and around swimming pools, river banks, or close to ponds, or any other water collection for that matter. Whereas children may have learned how to swim, some may not. And in fact, they may want to emulate what their peers, can do. The result is accidental drowning or near drowning.
South Africa boasts some of the finest water coastlines in the world. Our beaches are much more than a haven for the holiday makers and surfers. There's nothing quite like having fun during our summer holidays on open waters or in a swimming pool. Most children are attracted to water and are not afraid to play in it. Water is fun. It's part of their daily life. Yet that attraction can be deadly. As a result, drowning is common. It claims thousands of lives every year.
It's very important for a child to learn to swim, and there's different exposures that you can teach them from small. The reason is we live in South Africa, every second house have a swimming pool, even though your children might not be swimming at home or you do not have a pool at home. Somewhere in their life they're going to have an encounter with water.
Many are children who simply cannot swim. All it takes is for a child to go out of their depth, to be caught in a flood, a river, or in shallow water, and they can do nothing to save themselves.
In Mpumalanga, rescuers continue to work around the clock, but there's still no sign of an 8-year-old boy, a traffic officer, and another person. They're now presumed drowned.
Drowning is the second leading cause for accidental death for children, and about half of those deaths happen in backyard swimming pools. What most parents don't realize is how quickly and how quietly it can happen. It can happen in 20 to 30 seconds, and that's why child safety is so important, especially for children under 5.
Everyone should learn how to swim. It's easy.
Remember to always make sure there is an adult who can swim close by before you jump in the water.
Drowning is the #1 cause of injury-related deaths in children ages 1 to 4.
You should keep an eye on me at all times. Accidents can happen in a second.
A child is much less likely to drown if they can swim. It's that simple. They must learn how to swim to safety till help arrives.
It is the #1 cause of unintentional death. 40% occur in lakes, 32% occur in rivers, 12% occur in oceans, 10% occur in bathtubs, 6% occur in pools. It is 100% preventable. There are a few ways to prevent drownings. Wearing a life jacket, staying within arm's reach, and taking swimming lessons and first aid. It only takes 1 liter of water to drown. Stay safe.
Now, how can we prevent drowning, and how do we deal with this type of emergency? We continue our discussion on water safety this time around with Prof. Ashraf Kuvadia and Nicole Demontil. Now, let's talk a little bit about the importance of swimming. Prof, if I could start with you. I mean, in terms of trying to prevent, this whole situation of drowning.
Well, it can't be overemphasized that all children need to be taught how to swim, and they can be taught as early as in their toddler ages. And probably that's the most important safety or preventative aspect of drowning that one can ever do, is to teach a child how to swim.
From what age, though?
I'm not a swimming instructor, but I know that, you know, the swimming schools take even toddlers and infants on how to swim and get them, you know, to become capable of swimming, or at least keeping themselves above water in a very young age. I think, you know, from infancy, from the toddler period is absolutely the correct age to start engaging with a swimming instructor.
Right.
Yeah.
Because very often it's not, some of the children that drown, it's not so much those that know how to swim. It's the ones that come visit and they see others, you know, swim, and they're a bit embarrassed to say, no, look, I can't swim.
Yeah.
And they end up drowning. Can children save others from drowning?
Absolutely. There's lots of stories out there, and I think if you go to Dr. Google and have a look-see, you'll find stories of siblings that have saved younger siblings' lives, friends that have saved other friends' lives because they managed to get them out. There's just as many tragic stories where the children have gone in to help their friends and they themselves aren't strong swimmers.
Right.
So, you know, we discourage children trying to go in to save their friends, but if they can pull their friend out using a stick or maybe the pole from the swimming pool nets or something like that, and get them to a point where they can pull them out the pool, children can do CPR.
Yeah.
No one says they can't do CPR, and it's about calling for help as well and getting the right people to help.
Okay, just for the sake of our viewers, we're going to come back to what CPR is, and we'll actually demonstrate this to you.
Yeah.
Now, how can we make the swimming pool environment safe? I mean, I know we touched on this before, but just to re-emphasize, how can we ensure that that area is safe and secure?
Well, every adult who owns that pool or looks, or you know, that pool belongs to, has a huge responsibility to ensure that that pool is a very dangerous place and needs to be secured.
Yeah.
And there's a number of ways to secure the pool. Having a fence and a gate that kids cannot get over, but we know kids being what they are, they will get over, they will make a plan.
Yeah.
So probably having what's more effective in addition to the gate is to have pool nets that are constantly in use when the pool is not in use, you know.
Right.
Having said that, I think that every parent who has a pool needs to be aware of where their kids are or their friends' kids when they do come across, and make sure that they're securely away from the pool, so that, you know, kids are what they are. You know, they may even get under the net if it's not very secure, you know. So I would say that it really is a responsibility of the parents to ensure that they've run through this in their mind. You know, what could possibly happen? Could my child get over this fence? And it's very possible they can. Can they try and pull the net? Well, if you have a secure one, maybe not. They should certainly know how to do CPR. So they have to consider these things, because these things happen on a daily basis. Kids drown. And unfortunately, Selo, the story with drowning is a very sad one. You know, there's the usual outcome is a poor outcome unless one starts CPR very quickly.
Okay, we're gonna get back. Just before we start CPR, swimming aids, floats, and that sort of thing. Are there safe ones? Are there bad ones out there? Your comment?
I think as both a parent and as a paramedic, swimming aids are nice to have, but the reality is that so many people forget that swimming aids should only be used in the supervision of adults as well.
Right.
No child should be left to swim alone with a swimming aid. There should always be a competent swimmer and adult with them at all times. It's, you know, simple things, a floating ring, they can turn upside down. They're still floating, but they're the wrong way up.
Wrong way up, yeah. All
So
right.
as an example.
Okay, then we deal with the situation. Here's a child just drowned. Practically, what do you do?
Step one is get them out the water as quickly as possible. Send someone to call for help, or have your cell phone with you and call for help as well. But you need to start CPR. You need to start the
All right,
process.
we've been saying this CPR. What is CPR?
It is cardiopulmonary resuscitation. So effectively, what's happened in a drowning situation often is that as a consequence of them not being able to breathe because the water's in the airways, their heart, they go into what we call hypoxia, which means that there's not enough oxygen in their systems. And so their heart stops working. And so they stop breathing and their heart has stopped working.
Okay, so it's pumping the heart to get it to beat and getting the air in there.
You
to help
become
the
that
lungs.
child's temporary heart and lungs.
Right. Please show us how you do that.
Right. So step one is always check for responsiveness. You know, maybe by getting them out, you actually have brought them. So just a quick hello and maybe a tap on the foot might stimulate them enough.
Right.
No response. as soon as you have a look to see, are they trying to take a breath, but a good breath, as in the whole chest rises. If they look like they're just doing goldfish signs, then that's not good breathing. So immediately, the first thing we do is we find the middle of the breastbone, you find the nipples, middle of the breastbone, it's easy. And you immediately start compression. So you can do two hands.
Just before that, the position of the face. Some people will talk about, no, put the face on the side so that the child can vomit out the water and what have you. Your comment?
That makes sense, but if you have, without having to cut away the poor chap's neck, the airway, you need the pipe to be as straight as possible because you need the air to be able to get down into the chest, into the lungs. So you need the head, the nose to be in a nice line and the head slightly tilted. If you've ever watched a child sniff snot, we call it the sniffing position, but essentially just slightly elevated to maximize the airway to make sure that the pipe is as big as you possibly can get it. And as open as you can possibly get it. Okay. So I'm on the chest. I found the middle. On their breastbone, it's not difficult to find. It's in the middle. There's no fancy measurements. In the middle. And you basically, if you're strong enough, you can start compressing 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and you do that for 30 times. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and push hard and fast. You ever heard the song Staying Alive by the Bee Gees? Use that song as your method. I think I'm at 30.
You're exposing your age a bit there.
It's a fantastic song.
Again, the question comes, how hard do you press? Do you worry about breaking the ribs, or do you just press as hard as you can?
Children are really robust, and the goal is to press hard and to press fast. So you want to press approximately 1/3 of this part to their back. So 1/3 of the total chest depth.
So you should actually see the chest moving.
You should go down hard. If I'll do a whole round of CPR so that you can see it from start to finish, but basically press hard, press fast. And you want that song Staying Alive, the ha part, you want that ticking over in your brain the whole time because that's the rate that you need to go at. You're buying this child time, and you've got to buy them time quite effectively. So we press 30 times. So let me start again from scratch. We've done the hello. We've looked to see if they're taking adequate breaths. They're not. So I'm going to immediately go to compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Straight to breath. Block their nose. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. Oopsie, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. My goodness, I'm getting excited.
That can happen in real world.
It can.
So just to recap, so it's 30 compressions.
Correct.
And 2 breaths.
And 2 breaths.
Okay.
And what you do is when you blow, most people, and you keep doing that until emergency help arrives. Don't stop.
Right.
Unless the child starts groaning and moaning and coughing themselves, then you stop. But if they don't, you carry on until help arrives.
Okay, 2 things. One is, if you have someone to help you, all right, what is the procedure, 1? And 2, some people may say, no, we don't know what this child was, whether the child is sick or what have you. I can't put my mouth over the child. How do you get around these problems?
Right. So some people are very reluctant to do mouth-to-mouth, especially if it's not one of their own family members. Right. So there are options available. You can go to your local discount pharmacy stores, buy yourself a pair of gloves. Really, they're very inexpensive. And then you have what we call a one-way resuscitation valve. I stand under correction about prices, but you're looking at less than 10 Rand for one of these. Right. They come sealed, they're clean, and it's really simple. I mean, you just open it up, and it's very self-explanatory. It says this side only, and you put the part here, the wide, big part, inside the mouth, and then you fold this part over the face, and it's called a face shield.
Yeah.
And then you blow, exactly as I was covering the whole face. You cover this whole section here. You don't blow through the little hole. You blow through the entire section. Right. And that way you can protect transmission of disease to the child from you, but also transmission of disease from the child back
very
to
quickly, we've got about a minute left or less.
Put it in.
No, it's fine. You don't have to do. Now, you have someone to help you.
Yes.
How does it change that 30 and 2?
You know, for the lay person out there, we teach healthcare professionals to switch to 15 compressions and 2 breaths. But for the average person out there, you know what? 30 compressions, 2 breaths, stick with the basics. Push it 30 times, give 2 breaths, push it 30 times, give 2 breaths, and keep going until the child either starts responding or professionals have arrived to give you a hand.
Or perhaps if you get tired, you then can get the
and
other
you can
person
swap around.
to, you know.
We recommend that you do the 30 5 times and then swap around with somebody else to do the chest compressions.
Well, very valuable advice. Well, to Prof. Ashraf Kuvadia and Nicole de Montiel, thank you very much for being our guests on this show.
Thank you.
Now, every year, preventable injuries kill almost 1 million children around the world. Keeping kids safe is a global issue that directly affects all of us. From the second our babies are born, we know that we will do everything in our power to protect them. Let's care for all the kids like they are our own. If you'd like more information on child safety, please contact Child Safety South Africa on 021-685-5208. And otherwise, visit their website at www.childsafe.org.za. You can also contact International SOS on their telephone number 011-541-1300 or their webpage www.internationalsos.com. So join us next week again on SABC News. Watch repeat shows at 2 p.m. and 10 p.m. tonight. Otherwise, you can view the Health Talk on our YouTube. And from myself, Dr. Salam Mutawang, and the rest of the team, thank you for watching and happy holidays.
Every year, around 570 South African children die in pedestrian accidents because they weren't seen. At what point do you decide to get involved? You're bigger. Be the adult.